Hey guys, I'm Ezra Galston. Really excited to get to chat with all of you. Our time is short, 20 minutes. We'll try to make the most of it. So let's start here. I always feel like you should know who's kind of speaking to you and why you should listen to me. I'm not even sure you should respect me and listen to me, but let's go through it. And this is kind of the first time I'm doing this material out loud. So you'll tell me what you think, and we'll do some feedback, and we'll go from there. So why should you listen to me? I've invested in a few marketplaces. Cameo's here in the room. Spot Hero, who's speaking here today. Fly Home, it's a managed marketplace for real estate. Havenly, marketplace for digital interior design. I've written a bunch on marketplaces. I get it. I should stand over here so I don't cover the screen. Okay, we'll do that. Anatomy of managed marketplace, a bunch of stuff on Etsy and Stitch Fix. And so Dan, who helped organize this conference, gave me a call last year and said, hey, we speak about managed marketplaces. And when he called me this year, I said, I'll do the same thing. And they said, no, like, got to be different this year. We're upgrading the quality of the presentation. So hopefully that's what we'll get. So this year we decided to do a bit of a nuance. Last year was all about, hey, what is a managed marketplace? And we kind of did a deep dive into that. So I'm going to take 3 minutes and review the content from last year. And then this year, we're going to go kind of a step further in, if you're a regular marketplace, either unmanaged or just kind of peer-to-peer, what are the options for taking a bit more control of your marketplace and selling some supply? Great. I'm excited. Hands up if you're excited. Woo! Yes, I love that. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, quick 3-minute review of last year. I view the world this way, and it's a little bit elementary, but it helps to get through a presentation in 20 minutes. That there are basically 3 buckets of marketplaces. There are unmanaged marketplaces, which is like Craigslist, right? Roger said earlier, like, this thing is just crazy. It's the wild, wild west, right? eBay is kind of in that world as well. I mean, like, you kind of have a review system, but that's about it. Lightly managed. So Uber might be a lightly managed marketplace. Why? Because they basically verify that a driver is not a criminal. They do a really good job at that generally. Stuff like that, where you at least have some certainty and confidence in their marketplace that they care. And then you have the fully managed marketplaces. So Open Door and the Real are good examples. I leave Lux up there just because even though it no longer exists, it was a great example that I went into last year. So just to kind of take a step back, what are Open Door and the Real? We'll just kind of go into why they're managed marketplaces real quick. So for instance, the Real. Let's say you want to buy or sell a handbag. Today, if you go to eBay, you don't know if it is authentic. You don't know if it has scratches. All you have is a seller rating. Now, it may be good. It may be 4.8, or they may have 1,000 positive reviews, but you don't know if those reviewers are idiots or smart money, right? So you really don't have a whole lot of confidence in the system. Comes along the Real, and they are going to authenticate that bag for you. They're going to bring it into their warehouse. They're going to clean it up. They're going to make sure that it's really, really good. The trade-off is that eBay, for the benefit of selling that item, they will charge you 10%. The Real will charge you 40%. So that is the key insight to a managed marketplace. A managed marketplace has the following structure always, almost always, which is that they are a value-added intermediary in the middle. And what they do as a value-added intermediary is that they offset risk from you, the buyer, to them, the intermediary. In exchange for offsetting that risk, they charge the seller a lot more money, or potentially the buyer more money, but typically the seller. Okay, great. You can take a picture of that, or you can just trust me, or you can Google anatomy of a managed marketplace and read it on TechCrunch. Okay, so I went through last year kind of what the 4 reasons why a marketplace would want to be actively managed. I'm not going to do all of them this year, but just kind of 1 or 2. Let's say that go to number 4. Let's say that it's really slow to transact in your marketplace. Let's say you are a real estate marketplace where on average it takes 120 days to sell your house. So comes along Open Door, and Open Door says, type in your address. We'll make you a bid. If you like the bid, we'll buy your house tomorrow, or 72 hours, whatever it is, right? That is a radically different experience. So what managed marketplaces are able to do is they are able to create a radically better, 10x better experience, right, by taking on a whole bunch of the risk in the middle. Open Door now has that house on their inventory, on their balance sheet. That's really, really interesting. But what that means to you as the seller is that you're done with that house and moved out, or not really moved out, but you've sold it in 3 days. Fine. Okay. Moving along, we're going to go back to the other side of the graph today. Okay, who's still with me? Who's excited to go? Well, I'm going fast. I know. Okay, 20 minutes, not a lot of time. So just trying to race. Okay, let's say you're in the other side, on the left-hand side of this graph. You run a peer-to-peer marketplace, a peer-to-peer marketplace, or just your standard marketplace where you connect third-party sellers with buyers. So the question is, what do you do if you want to take a bit more control of your supply? And the questions are, why would you want to take more control of your supply? So I've identified kind of 4 good reasons why you might want to. So we'll call this kind of like the intermediate course. If you haven't yet launched your marketplace, it's probably not relevant. But if you have one and it's up and running, this may be stuff you want to start thinking about. So let's start here. Number 1. As we've learned, as digital marketplaces have become more out in the open, we've learned that great marketplaces, as they scale, they become supply constrained in general. Supply constrained, not demand constrained. So if you're supply constrained, you want to start thinking about what can I do that may be a little bit artificial, but can non-linearly expand my supply so that I can service more demand. That might be one. Number 2, you might have better data about what the demand side of your marketplace wants than what typical general third-party sellers know. For instance, here's 2 good examples. Netflix. So Netflix aggregated a bunch of content from a bunch of different third-party providers. They started to realize that they had better data about what we all wanted to watch than MGM or IFC did. So they went and started producing their own content so that they could service what they knew about us that was not being addressed. Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub, they now know more about the demand of what people want to eat and where it is than the restaurants that exist around us. That's why there's been such a rise of ghost kitchens or cloud kitchens, right? Because they are actively going out to restaurants and saying, hey, why don't you peel off a quarter of your kitchen? Because I know you're running a Mexican restaurant, but we happen to know that like Japanese food would crush it in the zip code on this street, whatever it is. Okay, marketplaces often, though not always, are a low take rate game. There are some who suggest that you should basically crater your take rate as low as possible so no one can come and undercut you. Okay, we can discuss strategy another time, but marketplace operators are always looking for opportunities to increase their margins. So one way of doing that, like the kind of epitomized by Bill Gurley, is like preferred listings, right? Yelp has preferred listings. Another way is by actually selling some of your own product in the marketplace, and that's kind of what we're going to get into, and we'll go through some economics in a little bit. And then the last one is, it can be that depending on how many suppliers you have, if you have a concentrated group of suppliers in your marketplace, they can start to get more power than you're comfortable with. And so by owning some of the supply, you can start to reimagine that. Okay, so we're going to go into one of my favorite examples of a marketplace that's done this well. I'm going to do a quick time check. Sorry. Okay, cool. We've got a bunch of time, so it's going to be fun. Okay. Farfetchd went public mid last year. It's valued at $8 billion as of today. I checked this morning because of that battery index that was announced. I figured I should figure out what it's worth. Okay, so Farfetchd is a marketplace that connects sellers of luxury goods directly with buyers, with consumers. Now, what they do is that, unlike an eBay that is either kind of, individuals or kind of really smallish sellers in the big scheme of things, they started by going out to independent boutiques. So they only have about 1,000 sellers in their marketplace. They do $8 billion, they're worth $8 billion, and they have 1,000 sellers on their supply side. Fine. So I was told I can do this. What the blue circles represent here is where they started. They started with independent boutiques. So there's about 750 of these on their marketplace. Those independent boutiques were how they started putting the supply on. And what they realized is that they were supply constrained. So they then went out to these red circles. These red circles are brands. These are brands like Gucci, Burberry, whatever. They basically started selling directly through their marketplace. And then in 2016, 2015, they did something interesting. They bought their own retail store, and that's what this green circle is here. Now, this green circle is going to become increasingly important because of what they determined, and we'll go through that in a second. So that's basically the supply mix today. It's about 75% independent boutiques, 25% large brands, and one retail store that is going to have an outsized impact. Okay. So this is what it looks like if you want to buy something on Farfetchd. So what they've done is they've obfuscated and commoditized the suppliers. So this is a $3,200 Gucci bag that I cannot afford, but I am from Chicago, and maybe you guys can because you live in San Francisco. I don't know. Okay. So this is a Gucci bag, but here's what's interesting. Do you know where it's coming from? Is it coming from Gucci? I don't know. Is it coming from one of their independent boutiques? I don't know. Is it coming from their own retail store called Browns? I don't know. So we have no clue who it's coming from. So let's kind of go through real quick what that allowed Farfetchd to do. So Farfetchd realized that they have a retail store called Browns. It does only 10 million of revenue out of their over a billion, in GMV. But if they're selling in brick and mortar, why don't they list that inventory online as well? And so they started doing that. They started selling it pretty well. And so they started buying more and more inventory wholesale, listing it, even if they didn't have capacity in their retail store, listing it on their marketplace. Now, why does this matter? So let's think about it. Let's say that there's a $1,000 handbag and it's trading. I mean, I don't know if you guys, like, there are wholesale markets for all these things. Let's say you can basically buy it for $150 in the wholesale market and it retails at $1,000 on Farfetchd. So if they sell it from a third-party seller, they make 30%, $300. But if they buy it for $150 and sell it for $1,000 through their own marketplace, they make $850. Now there are some inventory risks, but they have better data than any other supplier on their platform. And what that's enabled them to do is as follows. So the numbers you see here at the bottom, right? 2015, sorry, I'm doing the wrong button. 2015, they sold $0 of their own inventory. 2016, they sold $0 of their own inventory out of 600 million. 2017, they sold 36 million of their own inventory out of 900 million, so 3%. Last year, they sold 113 million of their own inventory out of 1.4 billion, so about 8%. I estimate, based on how much inventory they've purchased already thus far in 2019, that they'll sell about 250 million and almost $500 million of first-party inventory through a marketplace that until 2016 was exclusively third-party sellers by 2020. That's about 20% of all their sales. And why are they going to do that? Because they have better margins on that, assuming that they're able to manage the inventory buying and ops correctly, and they have better data about what customers actually want. Now, the question is, and we're going to get back to this at the end, what does that do to all your other suppliers who are on your marketplace? Are they happy about that? Are they concerned about that? So we'll get back to that. So that is one way that you can start to impact the supply side of your own marketplace. The other is something called private label that most of us are probably familiar with. The reason we're familiar with this is because every retailer basically in history has utilized private label sales in one format or another. So I love looking at retailers, what I call the OG marketplaces, because I love, like, history is our best precedent. And all of these guys sell a huge amount of private label through their marketplaces. Now, why are they marketplaces? You may go, oh, that's a retailer, that's not a marketplace. Well, Macy's, Walgreens, they aggregate product from hundreds, if not thousands, of different suppliers, and you and I all go there and buy it. That is a marketplace. Call it a retailer, it's a marketplace. Okay, it's not a digital marketplace. They have e-commerce. It is not a digital marketplace. Amazon and stuff is, but fine. Okay. So what's interesting to note, in the interest of time, I am not going to go into the historical precedents of how private label developed, although I will say that if you read John Updike in high school, if you guys remember that short story called A&P, they were one of the progenitors. Okay, fine. If you look at mature categories of private label, this is like grocery, eggs, milk, I don't know, meat, poultry, like over 50% of these markets in every grocery store around our country are private label goods. They are not they are not a mass market brand. They are private label either through the retailer themselves or through some totally niche private labeler that we don't really know. So in my mind, that's interesting because today digital marketplaces don't do a ton of private label. They do some, but not a ton. Someone like Stitch Fix, you actually may not realize, actually now has 4 or 5 of their own private label brands. And why do they do that? Because they were supply constrained, not demand constrained. So I suspect that if history is any guide, there will be a lot more private label in today's digital marketplaces, or effectively private label, than there is today. So this is just a really quick breakdown of why this matters, looking at it from a unit economics perspective. Now, I just want to caveat, this is really, really simplistic and basic, and I wouldn't go take us to your board and be like, we need to do this, because they can look at it and say, well, that's not the true cost of doing business here, but it gives you an idea of why it matters. Okay, let's start on the left-hand side. Let's say you're a 20% take rate marketplace, kind of the example we went through before. You sell a $100 good, you take 20%, less fulfillment costs, fine, payment processing, whatever, you get $15. Now let's say you sell that same $100 good, but because you bought it wholesale or you even built it private label, your 70% gross margin, even if your fulfillment costs are a lot higher, I'm estimating right here, you end up with $35 in net revenue, not 15. So that's interesting when it comes to how do you increase the economics of marketplaces that historically are pretty low take rate businesses. What about the other side, which is that if you are able to have to smooth out the liquidity of your marketplace, right? Have the supply that your customers actually want when they want it, what'll that do? Well, what it implies is that they'll come back more often. And what happens to your economics? We know how expensive acquiring customers are. What happens to your economics if they come back more often? Well, here's one example. We're not going to go through all of it, right? But even on a very base case, if you turn 1.5 times of purchasing into 2 times, has a massive impact. I view it as basically a 3x. Again, this is generalized, basic. Take a picture. You can attack me later, right? But it has a very big impact. Now, the question is, this all sounds super good, and you're all going to rush home and I need to go private label stuff in China. Okay, there is an impact to this stuff. 5 more minutes max. Okay, so what happens if you actually do this? So the example we went through before is Netflix started by aggregating content from all the major studios, distributors, and then one day they realized that they thought that they understood more about you and me than the distributors understood about us, and so they went out and they produced House of Cards. And then they had a second show that was not so great, but their third show was Orange is the New Black. Those shows most of us have probably watched because they were really good shows. They hit them on the mark, right? But what started to happen is Hulu, that was a joint venture of Disney, Comcast, Time Warner, and Fox, started withholding content from Netflix. There's some content that they're now charging more. There's some content that they're just withholding themselves. And there's some content that they're now producing themselves, right? But what you can see is that your suppliers may not sit back and take it. Now, to some degree, they do still need Netflix. To some degree, but they're not sitting back and taking it. Another example I like to use is Amazon. So ShopRunner is not super well known. I love it because I'm from Chicago and it's a Chicago business. But what's interesting about this one is that, okay, first off, I mean, people were probably fighting back against Amazon before they started private labeling, but when they started introducing every private label under the sun in every category from baby to basics to whatever it is, right? A whole bunch of retailers, about 200 today, whether it's Neven, Brooks Brothers, they all basically band together on ShopRunner. Some of them are investors directly. Some of them, it's just their kind of official fast shipping stores. And they basically banded together to do most of their deals through ShopRunner, 2-day free shipping through ShopRunner. And it's effectively a joint venture against Amazon. Now, again, there's a lot else going on here than just private label efforts, but it's a good example of what'll happen, right? That your suppliers may start to collude against you if they fear that their own existence is in danger. Okay. So this is kind of our summary slide, and I'm glad that we are mostly right on time. A little bit about kind of how to start to do this. So in general, your consumers need to be somewhat indifferent to the source of supply. What's actually been interesting about looking at the ghost kitchens on Uber Eats is I mean, probably you have friends too. I have a bunch of friends that are I don't know if I certainly wouldn't get a ghost kitchen for dinner, but maybe for the office for lunch. It's not there yet, but I suspect it will be pretty soon. And by the way, if any of the virtual kitchen companies get big enough, Uber Eats is right now so supply constrained, I suspect they will buy them, which is why it's an interesting category. But fine. In general, consumers need to be somewhat indifferent to the source of supply, or even respect your marketplace enough, like Stitch Fix, that they would kind of be excited that you're building your own supply. The consumer experience needs to be as good, if not better. That's why data is an important piece of this. So your two options, as we went through, are to either make this such a small percentage, like you literally only do it on the edge cases of the normal distribution, so that your suppliers aren't scared, or that you get big really, really fast on it, 0 to 20% in 3 years, so that you have enough power that you can still dictate the terms of your marketplace. And the economics must make sense. You have to realize that you're weighing trade-offs here. Suppliers aren't dumb. They will start to figure it out. And so what are the true trade-offs? Are the economic trade-offs worth the risks? They may well be. We certainly see that in a lot of today's marketplaces, but it's something worth considering. And that is all. My name is Ezra. I run a fund called Starting Line. I probably should have started with this, but I wanted to jump in the interest of time. I'm based in Chicago. We invest in consumer and marketplaces. It's a seed stage fund, and this was fun. Thank you so much. So start Q&A sign. If there is any Q&A, happy to take it, but I know that was a lot and quickly. All right. Okay. Thank you. Looking for my tea. Yes, Mr. Beilinger.
So what's your take on, you saw Elizabeth Warren's proposal?
Yeah. I almost put her quote in this.
And
Yeah.
Private label, what's your take?
I liked you. Everybody should read your blog post. Go to acrowdedspace.com and read your blog post on Elizabeth Warren's. Shameless plug. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thanks for that.
Okay. Oh, hello.
Hey, my marketplace is Baby Equip. We deliver.
And what is your name?
My name is Fran Meyer.
Cool. Hi, Fran Meyer.
Hi, how are you?
I'm wonderful.
Great. So, one of our tensions is we're about the provider, usually a mom who delivers the gear, a wide range of gear,
What kind of gear?
strollers, car
Cool.
seats,
Yeah.
toy boxes, books,
Yeah.
things like that. They differentiate on terms of the quality of the gear, or somebody in Tahoe might have the hiking package, and in Miami a beach package.
Sure.
So they're really good because they localize. So the question is, I think we're more of a service marketplace than strictly a goods marketplace.
Okay.
Right? And in terms of service, we have insurance and so on.
Right.
What do I do here? I mean, I'm thinking private label cribs because there's not really good crib on the market for what we do. But I'm not sure that would give us some of those advantages.
So, I mean, again, without knowing
Or
the
is it
specifics.
is it making my providers employees, which I may be forced to do anyway?
Because you are a service where people come and install this stuff. They bring the good, they own it.
They own the gear, they deliver it, they do set it up, yeah.
Right.
Set it up, make sure it's clean, make sure it's safe, and we manage that. We train them, we do spot checks. I think we'd be a lightly managed under your model.
Yeah. So the question there for me is a question of, I guess, liquidity. Like it's, and experience. So again, without knowing the details, we can chat later. Like I don't know if you need that yet. It may be that your focus is better served today investing more in logistics or customer service than it is trying to rethink the boundaries of your supply or where it comes from. So that's interesting, right? Because that would be where you have a data advantage over all the crib makers, that what you're getting from your customers is like, we actually don't trust this. It's like, that's interesting. I wonder what that would unlock if they did trust us, right? So that's kind of the way to start thinking through it.
Thank you.
Cool. Yes, hi.
Consumer tech or also enterprise?
Me personally,
Yeah, your phone.
I only invest in consumer tech. Shameless plugs are wonderful. I'm all about it. I normally wear a gear hat. Yeah, hey. Sorry, who are you?
I'm John, VP of Marketing at Geek.com.
Cool.
So I guess my question is, to some extent, what you're describing in going to first party or private label is logical, but for a lot of people internally represents a pivot. How do you recommend starting to have these conversations internally and presenting them to the business?
I think it would have to be I think we'd be going back to one of the, I would just start thinking about these. Like, do we fit into any of these? Do we either need, are our margins unsustainably low? Do we have better data than all of our third-party suppliers? Do we have liquidity bumps that we're trying to stabilize and smooth out? Or are we are our suppliers calling us and telling us, hey, you know how you're 20% today? Well, we're going to leave unless you're 10%, right? And you're like, I should probably start planning against that. Like, if you don't have any of those issues, then I wouldn't worry about this yet. That's why I call this kind of like the intermediate level marketplace course, right? Because if you're up and running, you may not need this, but you might, right? And we find that a lot of people do at some point in their marketplace journey. Cool. Wonderful. Thank you so much for the interest and love. Appreciate it.